Welcome, dear listener, to Whispers of the Night. Tonight, we journey into a tale as old as time, a quiet reimagining of the beauty and the beast. As you settle into the comfort of your pillow, let your breath slow and your mind grow. Soft at the edges, outside your window, the rain might be tapping gently, or perhaps the night is still, holding its breath just for you. In this place, time drifts like petals on water, and each word is a step deeper into a dream, so close. Your eyes let the day fade away, and together we'll wander into a story where love and time weave their gentle spell. Feel the pillow beneath your head, the way it cradles you, holding you in a gentle embrace. Take a slow breath in and a longer breath out. With every exhale, let a little more of today slip away, like soft sand trickling between your fingers. Imagine a warm glow of light surrounding you, gentle, golden, safe. You hear the sound of a fire crackling quietly in the corner, the low hum of a night at peace. In your mind's eye, a garden stretches out before you, roses heavy with dew, their petals glistening in the moonlight. You walk along the cobblestone path, each step muffled by the moss and grass that have grown between the stones. The air smells of rain and old books, and somewhere in the distance, a clock chimes softly. Your thoughts drift like leaves on a slow-moving stream, carried wherever the current takes them. There's no need to try, no need to hold on, only to float in this moment. Here, there are no worries, no lists to remember, no doors to close. Only the steady rhythm of your breath, the warmth of your blanket, and the quiet magic of the night. Let the calm settle deep into you as the world outside fades into soft, starlit silence. The Beauty and the Beast. A rose in the rain. The garden greets you like a memory you half remember, the kind that waits patiently at the edge of thought until you wander close enough for it to step forward. Rain falls in soft threads, each drop a bead of light, bending the morning into 1,000 tiny arcs. The air is thick with the fragrance of roses, but it is not the cloying sweetness you might expect. Is cooler, quieter, a scent that moves slowly, as if respecting the stillness of the day. You walk with measured steps, feeling the fine mist gather on your skin, the way cool silk might settle over bare shoulders. The path curves gently, its gravel muted by the damp. Along both sides, rose bushes rise like watchful sentinels, their blooms deep in hue velvety reds, warm ambers, pale creams that almost fade into the mist. Each flower seems to cradle the rain, each petal an open palm catching the sky. You pause. By one particular bloom, the color of late summer sunsets, a droplet rests at the tip of its petal, trembling but holding, as if reluctant to let go. You lean closer, noticing how the curve of the petal shapes the droplet into a lens, and how, through that lens, the world is remade. You see the inverted reflection of the garden path, the blurred outlines of leaves, the faint glimmer of a spider's web spun across the thorny stem. Here, in this single sphere of water, less than a centimeter wide, physics quietly performs its work. Surface tension keeping the droplet whole, cohesion binding each molecule to its neighbor, adhesion clinging the droplet to the petal's fine skin. The science is delicate, but no less wondrous for its simplicity. Water molecules, bound by hydrogen bonds, draw together like friends linking arms. These bonds are weak individually, yet together they form a resilient film, the invisible skin you feel when you dip a hand into still water. That skin is what holds the droplet round and bright, resisting the pull of gravity until its weight becomes too great. When it falls, it will join the earth below, seeping into the dark weave of soil where roots wait like quiet mouths to drink. You let your eyes wander over the rose, noticing the faint shimmer of its epidermis. Roses, like all plants, wear a waxy coat called the cuticle, a barrier that slows the escape of water, protecting against both drought and disease. The rain does not soak the petals easily. Instead, it beads, gathering into perfect spheres that roll or cling, depending on the minute textures etched across the surface. This is nature's own waterproofing, a lesson in efficiency shaped over millions of years. You keep walking, and the path narrows slightly, as if encouraging you to slow your pace even more. The rain's rhythm changes as you pass beneath the arching branches of an old oak, the sound turning from a broad, open hush to a hushed patter. Each leaf above you receives the rain differently, some catching and holding it, others letting it slip through in thin, glistening threads. You think about how each drop's journey from cloud to earth is shaped by countless tiny decisions of air currents, leaf angles, and wind's invisible hand. Beyond the oak, the roses return, their colors muted by the gray sky. You stop beside another bloom, this one pale as morning fog, its petals unfolding like pages of an unread letter. The rain has gathered here too, those smaller droplets, each clinging to the slight ridges along the petal's edge. You imagine these droplets as small planets in orbit, their mass insignificant on a human scale, yet enormous to the petal itself. You recall that even the smallest bead of water has weight, its pull felt in the tension of the plant's tissues. Your breath feels slower now, matching the pace of the garden. You notice the deeper layers of scent-wet earth beneath the roses, a faint mineral note in the rain, the green pulse of leaves breathing. Plants do breathe, though not as you do. Through the tiny mouths of stomata, they draw in carbon dioxide and release oxygen, a silent transaction that makes the air you breathe possible. On days like this, when the world feels wrapped in rain, the process continues. Though the stomata may close slightly, to prevent too much water loss. The plant adjusting itself to the weather's mood. The path bends again, leading you toward a stone bench tucked beneath a lattice, heavy with climbing roses. You sit the stone cool through your clothes and watch the rain gather in the folds of leaves. A bee, its wings glistening with droplets, rests under the shelter of a blossom, waiting for the shower to ease. You think about how even the smallest creatures must navigate the weather, adjusting their movements, their foraging, their very patterns of life to fit the world's shifting conditions. To a bee, a drop of rain is not gentle, it is a heavy sphere that could batter delicate wings from the air. And so, the bee waits, still as the bench you sit upon. From here, the garden feels like a breathing thing. Each plant, each insect, each drop of water plays a part in its quiet symphony. You remember that rain is not only water, it is water carrying whispers of where it has been. A single drop may have risen from the ocean weeks ago, traveled high into the atmosphere, frozen into ice crystals that drifted in the upper winds before melting and falling again. Along the way, it may have gathered microscopic dust, pollen, or salt, each speck a story of another place, another time. The droplet on the rose in front of you might have begun as vapor above a distant sea, carried here through patient cycles older than mountains. The thought is grounding and unmooring all at once. You are part of this same cycle. The water in your body, more than half of you, has moved through rivers, clouds, and rain countless times before. The same molecules may have fallen as snow on a glacier centuries ago, or run through the roots of a tree that stood before you were born. When you drink, you join that cycle. When you breathe, you release vapor back to the air, contributing to the same endless circulation. You lean back against the lattice, feeling the soft creak of wood under your shoulders. The rain continues, a sound like gentle static, or a far-off applause from an audience you can't see. Time loosens here. There is no need to measure it in minutes or hours. You think instead in the slow measures of plant growth, in the patient seconds it takes for a droplet to swell, slide, and fall. A small bird flits into view, landing on a nearby branch. Its feathers are puffed against the cold, its head tilting as it eyes you without fear. Birds, too, read the rain. Some see it as a pause, a time to conserve energy. Others take it as an opportunity to forage for earthworms, drawn to the surface by the moisture. The bird hops once, twice, then disappears into the hedge, vanishing as quietly as it arrived. You rise from the bench, the path calling you onward. The rain is lighter now, the drops fewer, though the garden still glistens. You pass a cluster of rose hips, small, round, and red against the muted greens. These are the fruit of the rose, each one holding seeds within. You recall that rose hips are rich in vitamin C, a gift the plant offers long after its petals have fallen. In this way, the rose extends its life beyond beauty, beyond the season's bloom, into nourishment and renewal. The path opens slightly as you near the far hedge. The roses thin, replaced by lavender with silvered leaves, their scent rising when the rain brushes past. You take a deep breath, the mingling aromas of rose, lavender, and rain, a tapestry you will carry with you. Somewhere beyond this hedge, another space waits, a place you cannot yet see, but whose presence hums at the edges of your awareness. You pause at the gate in the hedge. A final rose leans toward you here, its petals heavy with the last of the rain. You brush a fingertip along its edge, feeling the smoothness, the coolness, the faint give beneath your touch. A single drop falls, darkening the soil at your feet. You imagine that drop sinking deeper, finding its way through layers of earth, feeding roots you will never see, that the garden feels both complete and unfinished, as if its story continues just out of sight. You sense that stepping beyond the hedge will not end this moment but carry it forward, into spaces where the rain's memory lingers and the rose's scent still follows. Softened by distance, beyond the hedge, there is the faint sound of water, steady, deliberate, like the heartbeat of a hidden spring. You wonder how far that sound travels, and what quiet truths it carries with it into the next place. The Merchant's Road. The night holds its breath. You feel it in the stillness between the lantern's sway and the sound of the merchant's boots on the cobbles. The street seems narrower than it did by day, as if the darkness itself has leaned closer to listen. He walks slowly, not from hesitation, but from the fatigue that comes when miles have settled into the bones. Each step rings faintly, softened by the fine dusting of frost that has begun to settle between the stones. Cobbled roads have their own music. Each stone is shaped and placed by human hands, set into sand and earth. Their unevenness, a reminder of the centuries they have endured. The merchant's boots find a rhythm over them, heel to toe, the sound changing slightly where the stones are damp from an earlier rain. You imagine the history beneath his feet, roads like these were once the arteries of trade, connecting distant cities and small villages, carrying salt, silk, spices, and stories. Some were Roman built, designed with layers of stone and gravel to shed water efficiently, a design so enduring that traces of it remain in modern roads today. The lantern in his hand is not bright by modern standards, but in the hush of the street it glows like a captured star. You notice the way its light falls in a trembling circle, each gust of wind shifting the flame and sending shadows racing along the walls. Lantern light behaves differently in the cold. The air tonight is still enough that the flame does not gutter, but its glow feels sharper, clearer, because cold air is denser than warm. That density changes how light scatters, making edges appear more defined. Tiny ice crystals in the air, invisible in daylight, catch the light here and there, scattering it into faint halos that follow his steps. He turns a corner, leaving the last row of shuttered houses behind. The wind meets him immediately, funneling through the gap between buildings. You hear it brushing past his coat, a low, steady murmur. The chill it carries is not just the absence of warmth, it is the movement of heat away from the body. Air conducts heat poorly compared to water, but when it moves, convection speeds the loss, drawing warmth from skin and cloth alike. The merchant adjusts his scarf, tucking it higher around his neck, instinctively preserving the thin layer of heated air his body has created beneath the wool. The road widens briefly into a small square, empty except for a stone fountain in its center. Its basin holds only a thin layer of ice, its surface etched with delicate branching patterns. These are called frost flowers, formed when moisture in the air deposits directly onto the freezing surface without first becoming liquid. The symmetry is not perfect. Nature rarely is, but each branch follows the same general logic, growing outward in response to temperature, humidity, and the microcurrents of air above the fountain. The merchant pauses just long enough to run a gloved hand along the stone rim, feeling the texture of centuries beneath the thin veil of ice beyond the square. The cobbles give way to a packed dirt road. The change is almost imperceptible underfoot at first, but the sound shifts. Dirt absorbs more than it returns, the steps becoming muffled, intimate. The road here is edged with bare trees, their branches black against the cloud-heavy sky. A faint crunch marks the frozen ruts left by wagon wheels. You can almost measure the passage of time in them, the deep, softened ruts from early autumn rain, hardened now by winter's breath, preserved until the thaw. He walks on, his pace unhurried. Somewhere in the darkness, an owl calls a low, resonant sound that seems to come from everywhere at once. Owls hunt more easily in winter, their feathers adapted to silence, their wings broad enough to ride the thin air with minimal effort. The snow-brushed ground beneath the trees holds the faint tracks of small creatures' mice. Volsu's bodies are now in the owl's patient search. A low fog begins to gather along the edges of the road, curling upward from the colder ground. You think of how fog forms when air near the surface cools to the point that it can no longer hold all its moisture. The excess condenses into droplets so small they stay suspended, drifting with every shift of wind. In the lantern light, the fog glows softly, each droplet scattering the warm light into a halo. The merchant moves through it like a traveler in a dream, his breath mingling with the mist until the two are indistinguishable. Soon the trees close in, the road narrowing into a forest path. Here the cold deepens, the canopy overhead catches what little wind there is, and the stillness is profound. Snow clings to the north sides of trunks, a natural compass made by the weaker winter sun. This asymmetry happens because the sun's arc is low in the southern sky in this hemisphere, so the north sides remain cooler, shaded for most of the day, allowing snow and ice to persist there longer. The merchant's boots make a faint squeak in the cold as the frost-hardened soil presses back against the leather. His pack shifts with each step, the soft creak of straps, the only other sound. You think about the endurance such travel requires. In cold weather, the body burns more calories simply to maintain its temperature. Muscles shiver not out of weakness, but as a deliberate mechanism to produce heat. Every breath he exhales is visible, the vapor carrying away moisture from his body. The balance between conserving water and staying warm is a delicate one in winter travel. A break in the trees reveals a frozen pond. The ice is a pale blue under the lantern's glow, its surface marked by cracks that spiderweb outward from unseen points of pressure. The science of ice is a study in patience. It begins with small crystals, each one a hexagonal lattice formed. As water molecules lock into place, these lattices expand as they connect, pushing apart any impurities, air, sediment, even tiny aquatic life until the ice becomes a layered record of its own formation. Beneath the surface, the water remains liquid, insulated by the very ice that seals it. The merchant stops for a moment at the pond's edge. He kneels, resting the lantern on the snow beside him, and touches the ice with his gloved hand. He cannot feel its cold through the wool, but he can feel its smoothness, its silence. In the distance, a faint creak echoes, perhaps the sound of ice expanding in the night, adjusting to the subtle shifts of temperature. When he stands again, the road seems to darken. The forest closes in tighter now, the branches overhead laced so closely that the sky is no longer visible. His lantern's circle of light becomes a moving island in the black. In such darkness, the human eye adjusts, widening the pupils to gather every available photon. The cells responsible for low-light vision, the rods become dominant, trading sharpness and color for the ability to see shapes in dimness. Yet, even so, beyond the lantern's reach, the forest remains an indistinct sea of shadow. After some time, the path begins to rise. The incline is gentle but steady, and the merchant shifts his weight forward, adjusting to the climb. The cold air feels thinner here, not in oxygen but in moisture, the dryness noticeable in the way each breath seems to draw the warmth from his lungs. At the crest of the hill, the trees part to reveal a small clearing. In its center stands a weathered milestone, half buried in frost. Such stones were once common on roads, marking distances to nearby towns or cities, their carved letters wearing away under centuries of wind and rain. The one here is nearly unreadable, but its presence alone is a comfort. It means this path, however remote, is still remembered. The descent on the other side is quicker, the path winding between boulders covered in lichen. Lichens are quiet survivors, symbiotic unions of fungi and algae that can endure extremes of temperature and dryness. In winter, they slow almost to stillness, yet they remain alive, ready to stir again when warmth returns. Their pale greens and grays catch the lantern light like old parchment dot. At last, the forest thins. Ahead, you see the outline of a gate tall, wrought iron, its bars entwined with ivy that has kept its color through the frost. Evergreen ivy owes its endurance to specialized leaf structures and a waxy cuticle that slows water loss, allowing it to photosynthesize even in the short days of winter. The merchant approaches slowly, lifting the lantern to better see. The gate is closed, but there is no lock. Beyond it lies a path you cannot yet make out, swallowed by the darkness and the silence. He stops before it, listening. The wind has gone still, the forest behind him a hushed memory. The frost on the ivy glitters faintly, catching the last unsteady tremors of the lantern's flame. The air feels heavier here, as if the world on the other side of the gate belongs to a different season, a different time. The merchant's hand rests on the cold iron. For a moment, he does not push it open. Instead, he stands in the quiet, his breath slow, the lantern's glow caught in the curve of the ivy leaves. Somewhere beyond, there might be another road, or no road, at O lonely, the unknown, waiting. The Castle of Quiet Wonders. The castle does not rise suddenly from the earth. It emerges as if the forest has been guarding it all along. Moss curls up the stones at its base. Ivy drapes across high windows, and the turrets lift themselves into a pale winter sky. The gates, tall and iron-bound, open without sound, though you imagine the slow creak of hinges deep inside the metal, the vibration traveling into the stone. Even here, sound behaves differently. Stone reflects it, carries it, sometimes distorts it into echoes that seem to come from behind you when they are in front. Inside, the air feels warmer than you expect. Castles like this were never meant to be heated evenly. Instead, heat pools in pockets near great fireplaces, in small side chambers where thick curtains keep out drafts. The walls are thick enough to delay the passage of heat, acting as a thermal mass. They absorb warmth during the day, releasing it slowly at night. You can feel it when you pass close to them. A faint coolness in summer, a slow radiance in winter. You follow beauty down a corridor lined with tapestries. They ripple slightly as she passes, not from any breeze, but from the subtle change in air pressure her movement causes. Each tapestry is a world of woven fibers, wool silk, sometimes threads touched with gold leaf. Wool insulates well, trapping pockets of air that make the hallway a little less cold. The dyes that colored them once came from plants, minerals, even crushed insects, their colors fixed into the fibers through a careful alchemy of mordants and heat. Some shades have faded with time. Others, like the deep indigo from the leaves of woad, remain as rich as when they were first woven. The corridor ends in a great hall. Its vaulted ceiling draws your gaze upward, where the ribs of stone meet in carved bosses. The design is more than beauty, distributes weight evenly, allowing the walls to stand thinner than they otherwise could. You think about the physics of arches, how compression travels down and outward, how the keystone at the top holds the whole structure in balance. Without mortar, without even perfect symmetry, the forces resolve themselves into stability. The room is lit not by torches, but by high windows that catch the muted daylight. The glass here is uneven, its surface wavering when you look through it. Early glassmakers spun molten glass into discs or poured it into sheets, then cooled it slowly to avoid stress fractures. These windows have endured centuries, each ripple in the surface bending light into softened shapes. From the hall, she leads you into the gardens. They are not the winter gardens you expect. Here, camellias open in red and white against the frost. Citrus trees hold golden fruit under dark leaves. Beds of herbs release scent when the air shifts. The warmth here is not magic alone, it is the art of creating a microclimate. High walls trap heat from the low sun, releasing it slowly through the night. Paths of dark stone absorb more warmth than pale ones, radiating it into the surrounding air. In one corner, you notice glass frames angled toward the Suna simple cold frame, the ancestor of the greenhouse. Beneath the glass, seedlings push upward in defiance of the season, their growth encouraged by trapped solar heat and the stillness of enclosed air. The air carries moisture, but not the biting dampness of the outside world. Moisture is balanced here, enough to keep leaves supple, but not so much that fungi can take hold. Plants breathe differently at night, releasing carbon dioxide instead of taking it in. And the gardener's or perhaps the beast himself must tend to that rhythm, ensuring ventilation when the sun returns. You brush a leaf with your fingertips, feeling the smooth cuticle that protects it from losing too much water in this carefully managed environment. Beyond the garden lies a smaller room, glass-walled and warm. This is the orangery, where delicate trees from warmer climates overwinter. Orangeries became symbols of prestige centuries ago, their glass and stone protecting fruiting trees from frost. Here, the air smells faintly of blossom and pith, the scent made sharper by the stillness. You recall that citrus releases oils when disturbed, each droplet a tiny container of complex chemicals that the plant uses to deter pests and attract pollinators. Beauty pauses, often not because she is lost, but because the castle seems to invite a slower pace. There is no hurry here, no pressing need to arrive. The rooms themselves seem to breathe, contracting slightly when you leave, expanding when you enter. You think about how air moves through buildings, how heat creates convection currents, rising and drawing cooler air behind it, how even in stillness there is motion, molecules vibrating in patterns too small to see. At last, she leads you to a chamber deep within the castle. The light here is dim, coming only from a narrow window set high in the wall. In the center of the room, on a pedestal of carved wood, sits a bell jar of glass. Beneath it, a rose. Its petals are deep crimson, their edges curling inward, as if sheltering the heart of the flower. A few have fallen, resting on the velvet beneath. The glass dome is clear but thick, its surface distorting the rose slightly when you view it from an angle. Glass is an amorphous solid. It flows so slowly over centuries that the change is almost imperceptible. Yet, in ancient panes, the lower edge is sometimes thicker from the weight of time. Here, the dome serves to separate the rose from the air's currents, slowing the loss of moisture, shielding it from dust and microbes. In botanical terms, it creates a microenvironment, stabilizing humidity and temperature just enough to prolong the bloom. You imagine the life inside those petals. Each is a thin layer of cells, their walls built from cellulose and lignin, their pigments anthocyanins absorbing certain wavelengths of light and reflecting others to produce that red. The color will fade in time as sunlight and oxidation Break down those pigments. Even under glass, time will have its way. The falling petals are a reminder of entropy, of the slow shift from order to disorder that governs every system. Living or not, beauty stands beside you, her gaze fixed on the rose. There is no chain here, no lock, no spoken threat, only the quiet agreement that the rose will be left untouched. Trust is a delicate equilibrium, like the forces holding the castle's arches or the balance of heat and moisture in its gardens. Once broken, it cannot be easily rebuilt. You feel the weight of that unspoken pact in the stillness. A faint sound reaches youth. Time here feels stretched, each second long enough to notice the dust motes drifting in the narrow beam of light from the window. The air smells faintly of wood polish and old paper, the sense of spaces that are tended but not often disturbed. You think about how smells travel not in lines, but in curls and eddies, following the motion of air molecules in invisible turbulence. You step closer to the glass dome, close enough that your breath would cloud it if you exhaled too quickly. You resist, holding your breath, respecting the stillness of this moment. In the tiny curve of reflection on the dome's surface, you see both your face and the faint outline of the window behind you. Two worlds, the one inside the glass and the one outside, separated by a thin, transparent wall. Beauty does not speak. She simply turns and walks toward the door, her steps muffled by the thick carpet. You follow, casting one last look at the rose. Another petal has fallen, though you did not see it drop. You wonder how many remain and whether anyone is counting. The corridor beyond feels warmer, brighter, though nothing has changed. Perhaps it is simply the contrast, or perhaps the castle shifts subtly to match your mood. The beast is nowhere to be seen, but his presence is in the careful tending of the gardens. The unbroken glass, the way the fire you pass burns low but steady. Never neglected, you think of how many layers of skill and knowledge hold this place. Together, the physics of stone and arch, the chemistry of dyes and pigments, the biology of blooms that defy the season, the invisible dance of heat and air. None of it shouts for attention. It all works quietly, like a heartbeat, like breath in sleep. The garden doors are open when you return, the winter air spilling in. You catch the scent of frost, of something distant and metallic on the wind. Beyond the walls, the forest waits, patient and shadowed. Somewhere past it, the world goes on at its ordinary pace. But here, in the castle, time feels like a long inhalation, the pause before something shifts from the open doorway. You hear a sound you do not expect, the low, steady murmur of water, as if from a fountain or a hidden stream. It seems to come from the farthest part of the grounds, beyond where you have yet walked. Days of gentle change. The first change comes so quietly that you almost miss it. A morning that feels just a little brighter than the one before. Light stretches itself across the stones of the courtyard in a longer arc, lingering a few moments more before slipping away into the forest's shadow. The days are lengthening, though the castle keeps its own time. You know why the light shifts. The earth tilts on its axis, a steady lean of about 23.5 degrees. That tilt draws the northern hemisphere closer to the sun's direct gaze, little by little changing the angle of light, warming the air. But here, in the castle's sheltered walls, you feel it less as a fact and more as a sensation, the slow unfurling of shadows, the way a window catches a beam where none had reached all winter. Beauty notices it too. She walks the gardens with the beast in the late afternoon, when the air is cold but no longer sharp. Their steps leave shallow impressions in the thawing ground, the soil darkening as the last crust of frost gives way. Filtering between grains of sand and silt, the soil drinks slowly, holding what it can in the fine spaces between particles, releasing the rest to the roots waiting below. It is in these walks that their conversations grow. At first, they speak only of what they seethe, the way the camille seem brighter against the melting snow, the calls of birds returning from their winter distance. Over time, the words become softer, carrying weight without urgency. Questions are asked, not to pry, but to understand. There are pauses, and in those pauses, trust takes root. Trust, you think, is its own kind of biology. In human bodies, it blooms as oxytocin and dopamine, chemicals weaving calm and connection between people. But beyond the chemistry, trust is also repetition, behaviors and responses aligning over time until uncertainty loosens its hold. Like a plant accustomed to drought that finally learns the rain will come. The heart learns to rest. The suppers they share are unhurried. Candlelight wavers between them, painting their faces in shifting gold. The physics of the flame is simple. Heat excites gas molecules. Light emerges from atoms, returning to their calmer states, but the effect is profound. Shadows soften. Even the food seems to taste richer under its glow. Outside, snow melts in places where the sun has touched the ground, but lingers in corners where shadows keep the air cooler. This is a matter of energy balance. Melting snow absorbs heat without changing temperature until the ice crystals break their bonds. Those bonds, the hydrogen connections between water molecules, require energy to loosen, and until they do, the snow remains whole. You watch the process in the castle gardens, the slow shrink of a snowbank, the way droplets gather at its base and slide into the soil, carrying with them bits of dust, pollen, and tiny fragments of leaf. The beast does not hurry beauty when they walk. Sometimes they pause at the orangery, where the scent of blossom cuts through the cold. Citrus blooms are small but potent. Their essential oils release into the air when the petals are disturbed, molecules light enough to travel easily to the nose. Scent, unlike sight or sound, takes a direct path into memory. Perhaps that is why the smell of orange blossom feels like a promise once encountered. It cannot easily be forgotten. Beauty's laughter comes more easily now, though it is still soft, like water over stone. You notice that the beast listens, more than he speaks, answering without force, his voice deep but quiet. Voices carry differently in winter air. Colder, denser air transmits sound faster, and with slightly higher fidelity, though the difference is subtle. The effect is more felt than measured, the closeness of a voice in the stillness between snow and thaw at night. The moonlight lays silver paths across the floor. The two of them sometimes walk beneath it, the garden walls catching the pale glow. Moonlight, to human eyes, it seems gentle, but in truth, it is only dimmer light, softened by distance and reflection. Even so, it makes the snow glow faintly, the paths luminous enough to walk without a lantern. The castle itself responds to the season. In small ways, the great stone walls, which had seemed to hold the cold through the long winter, now warm slightly in the sun's touch, radiating that heat back into the rooms. Fireplaces burn less fiercely. Curtains are drawn back earlier. In the kitchens, the smell of baking mingles with the cool air drifting in from the open windows. Yet always there is the rose. It waits beneath its glass, petals falling at their own pace, not hurried by the change in light or the softening of the air. Each petal that drops is a quiet measure of time. The physics of its fall is unremarkable, a pull of gravity, a surrender to the still air, but the meaning is heavier. The stem, still drawing from its reserves, keeps the remaining petals firm. But even under glass, the rose's cells continue their slow decay. Pigments break down, turgor pressure lessens, and the petal, once rigid with life, yields to the inevitable. Beauty glances at it sometimes when she passes the chamber, but she does not linger. The beast never mentions it, though his eyes rest on it longer than hers. You wonder whether either of them counts the petals, or if they measure time only in the lengthening days. In the moments they now share, one afternoon, rain falls instead of snow. You watch it bead on the rose leaves in the garden, each droplet a lens, bending the image of the sky. Rain in early spring is different from winter snow. Snow it forms in clouds, warmed just enough for ice crystals to melt before they fall. Each droplet's size depends on the collisions it has in the cloud, joining with others until surface tension and air resistance balance its descent. The sound of it on the castle roof is softer than snow's muted hush, but more constant, a thread of silver woven through the air. The beast opens a door to the garden after the rain. They step outside together, the air fresh and smelling faintly of wet stone. Petrichor, the scent after rain, comes from oils released by plants during dry periods, mixed with a compound called geosmin produced by soil-dwelling bacteria. Rain carries these to the air, where they reach the nose in the first minutes after a shower. The smell is grounding. Ancient Chur ancestors smelled it just as you do now. Beauty tilts her face toward the light breaking through the clouds. The sunlight is weak, but it carries more warmth than it did weeks ago. You recall that this increase is not only from the sun's higher arc, but also from the length of its presence each extra minute, a gift of energy to the earth, stored in soil, stone, and water. Life feels these minutes, even if it does not measure them. Trust, too, is a kind of lengthening. The space between silences grows comfortable. Eyes meet without darting away. The cadence of meals, of walks, of shared stillness becomes its own unspoken language. Like the return of migrating birds, It arrives, not suddenly, but with small signs: a closer seat at the table, a question asked without fear, a laugh that does not fade too quickly. Evenings come later now. The beast sometimes reads aloud, his voice low, the words curling into the corners of the room like smoke. The physics of sound in such a space is a quiet wonderstone reflects. Wood absorbs, tapestries scatter, each material shaping the sound's warmth or clarity. In this way, the castle becomes part of the conversation, holding their words in its walls. And yet, the rose continues. Its glass dome catches the light of each passing day. Its petals fewer now, the velvet beneath holding the ones already lost. You think about how much of life moves this way: growth and connection alongside endings, the two not canceling each other but existing together as inseparable as day and night. One evening, as the last of the snow in the garden dissolves into the soil, beauty pauses by the rose's chamber. She opens the door but does not step inside. The beast stands a few paces back, silent. The glass reflects both of them, side by side, though they do not look at each other. Another petal rests on the velvet, fresh enough that its edges still curl upward. The days will keep lengthening, the soil will warm, the gardens will shift toward green. Their quiet companionship will deepen, but the rose's patient countdown will not stop. No matter how much light the season brings, and somewhere beyond the garden wall, the sound of moving water calls faintly, as if the spring itself is waking, ready to guide them into a place they have not yet seen. The pull of home. It begins almost imperceptibly, like the moon's pull on a far-off shore. A thought of home, faint and small, drifts into her mind. It lingers, turning slowly, catching light from different angles, until it becomes a steady glow she cannot ignore. You know how tides work, how the moon's gravity tugs at the oceans, raising them toward its unseen hand. The pull is constant, but its effect depends on where you stand, whether the water can rise or whether the land holds it back. Longing works in much the same way. It can be hidden for a time, masked by routine, but it gathers strength in quiet hours, and once it begins to swell, it is difficult to stop. The castle is still her shelter, its walls familiar now, its halls mapped by countless slow walks and conversations. Yet, in the soft hours between waking and sleep, she sees her family's faces, the way her father's eyes crease when he smiles, the small way her sister leans in when she laughs. These memories come not as still pictures, but as movements, scents, and textures. A mug warming her hands, the sound of rain on the roof she grew up under, the feel of worn wood beneath her fingertips. The human mind holds such memories with remarkable fidelity. Scent in particular is a potent anchor-odor. Molecules travel directly to the olfactory bulb, which links closely to the limbic system, the part of the brain that shapes emotion and memory. That is why the faintest whiff of wood smoke can transport you years into the past, to a fire long burned down. One afternoon, as she watches the snow melt drip from the eaves, she turns to the beast. Her voice is soft, almost hesitant. She wishes to see her family. The words fall into the quiet like stones into still water, sending ripples outward. The beast does not answer at first. He stands by the window, looking at the gray sky, the lines of his shoulders unreadable. When he agrees, it is with a warning in his voice. Time moves differently when one steps away from the castle. Promises have weight. The rose has less time than it once did. She nods, though her eyes are already on the horizon, imagining the journey home. The road is half frozen mud, half forgotten path. She walks through the forest. She first entered in fear, but now it feels changed. She notices the call of a woodpecker, striking at a hollow trunk, the scattering of sparrows in the underbrush. Winter has loosened its grip, but not released it entirely. You know that birds sense seasonal change, not only by daylight, length, but also by subtle shifts in the Earth's magnetic field. Just as they can feel their route home, so too does she. Feel hers not in compass points, but in the tilt of her thoughts toward familiar hearthlight. When the village appears, it is like stepping into another life. The air smells of bread baking somewhere close, a warm, yeasty scent. In bread making, yeast consumes sugars in the flour, producing carbon dioxide that lifts the dough, and ethanol that bakes away in the heat. The smell is the product of Mellard. Reactions the same browning chemistry that turns crust golden and imparts the flavor of home. Her family meets her in the doorway, arms around her, faces lit with joy. They press her into a chair by the fire, asking questions faster than she can answer. The warmth of the hearth radiates into her skin. You recall that heat is simply energy in motion, transferred from wood's chemical bonds breaking to the air and to her, molecule by molecule. But in this moment, it feels like something more like love itself, given temperature. Days pass in a pattern as familiar as breathing. Morning light through the small paned windows, the scrape of chairs at the table, her sister's voice humming. In another room, she moves through the house with the ease of someone who knows exactly where to find the mugs, the blankets, the jar of honey. And yet sometimes, in the stillness of early evening, she feels the shape of another presence missing. She thinks of the beast, of the way his voice deepens in the quiet, of how the castle's windows catch the low sun. In dreams, she sees the rose under its glass dome, petals fewer than before, the velvet beneath them dark against the softness of their fall. The human brain is adept at adaptation, but it is also wired for attachment. When someone is absent, the same neural pathways that responded to their presence still fire, sending signals into a space that feels empty. This is why absence can feel like a physical ache, because, in a way, it is. One night, the wind rises, rattling the shutters. She dreams again of the beast, but this time he is lying alone in the great hall, his eyes closed, the air around him cold. The rose stands beside him, its last petals trembling as if in a current she cannot see. She wakes with her heart unsteady. The fire in her room burned to embers. Morning brings no relief from the dream's weight. Over breakfast, she laughs when her sister tells a story, but the sound is quieter, the edges of her smile softer. The tide inside her has shifted direction. The moon that pulled her toward home now tugs her back toward the castle. The journey in reverse feels faster, though the path is the same. Perhaps it is the urgency in her steps, or the way the light now falls longer across the road. The physics of walking is constant force meeting friction, muscles contracting in sequencing, but perception changes with intent. The forest greets her with the scent of damp earth and pine resin. Pine releases its resin as a protective seal when its bark is damaged, the volatile compounds rising easily into the air. They sharpen her senses, make her think of the polished wood in the beast's library. When she reaches the castle gates, the air is colder than she remembers. The courtyard feels wider, the shadows deeper. Inside, the great hall is silent. Her footsteps echo on the stone. She calls his name, and the sound returns to her, smaller than when it left her lips. She finds him not in the hall, but in a smaller room near the fire, though the fire is only a faint glow. His eyes open slowly when she enters, and for a moment there is no recognition. Then, like the last ember catching light, something shifts. He speaks her name. Absence, you think, is its own kind of winter. It slows the pulse, quiets the mind, draws the body inward. But the return, like the first thought, carries with it both relief and the fragile reminder that time has passed. The rose in its chamber is proof of that. Its petals are few now, their edges curling inward, the red deepening toward brown. She sits beside him, her hand resting on his. They do not speak much that night. Words are not always needed. The body communicates in subtler ways through warmth shared, through the slowing of breath, through the meeting of eyes in the half-light. Beyond the windows, the wind moves through the trees. Somewhere in the distance, water runs over stone. The sound soft but insistent. It threads through the silence between them, a reminder of motion, of change, of what the next days will bring. Love's Awakening. The room is quiet enough to hear the faint shift of air, the sigh of fabric as she kneels beside him. His breathing is shallow, uneven, the rise and fall of his chest almost imperceptible. You can feel time thinning here, each second stretching. Like a long thread, fragile but unbroken, she takes his hand warm still, though the warmth feels as though it is retreating. Fingers curl loosely around hers, not in strength, but in instinct. Touch, after all, is one of the first senses to form in the human body, developing in the womb long before sight or sound. The body remembers touch even when memory falters. Her voice is quiet, not a rush of words, but a steady stream, like a brook running over smooth stone. She tells him she is here, that she has come back, that she will not leave again. There is something in the way the human ear responds to familiar voices, a recognition not just in the brain, but in the body. Studies have shown that hearing the voice of someone beloved can lower cortisol levels, slow heart rate, even shift the rhythm of breathing toward theirs. And here you see it, the almost invisible way his chest begins to match the pace of her words. Her tears fall, warm against the skin of his hand. Tears, for all their emotional weight, are also a quiet marvel of biology. Basal tears keep the eye moist. Reflex tears flush out irritants. But emotional tears are different, carrying higher concentrations of stress hormones, as though the body itself is trying to pour out what it no longer needs to hold. Outside, the air changes, a faint shift in pressure, a hush that feels as if the world itself is holding its breath. Light begins to seep into the edges of the room, not sunlight exactly, but a kind of soft radiance, the way deep water glows in the presence of certain algae, or how a forest canopy seems lit from within in the first moments after rain. In the stillness, something stirs. You remember that change, true physical change, happens at the smallest scales first. In the body, transformations begin with the rearranging of molecules, the realignment of bonds invisible to the eye. In stone, weathering begins with a grain no bigger than dust. In people, it begins in the smallest shift of trust. The first moment, fear loosens its grip. His breathing deepens just slightly. His eyelids flicker. She leans closer, her forehead nearly touching his, and for a moment they are utterly still, as though the very idea of motion might disturb the fragile bridge between them. Then, in the space between one heartbeat and the next, something in the air seems to break, not with a sound, but with a release. It is as though the castle itself exhales. Light pours in now, tracing the walls, finding the carvings half hidden. In shadow, you can see motes of dust suspended in the beam, drifting with the slow grace of plankton in sunlit water. The change moves outward from him, a wave that does not push but unfolds. His features shift not with sudden magic, but with the slow inevitability of something returning to its true form. There is a principle in physics called potential energy, the stored energy an object holds due to its position, its condition, its readiness to change. A boulder poised on the edge of a hill, a spring compressed, a heart waiting for the moment it feels safe enough to open. This is what you see in him now, the release of what was held in stillness too long. The fur recedes from his hands, revealing skin pale from years without sunlight. His posture straightens, as though invisible weights are being lifted. His face, the one she had never seen before, merges not as a stranger's, but as something she has always known. You realize that recognition is not only about features, it is about presence, the sense of a person that remains constant through every change. The castle brightens, as if it too is shedding years. Stone walls lose their dampness, the dark stains of neglect fading like frost in morning sun. Tapestries, once dulled by dust, regain their colors, reds deepening, blues sharpening to a rich midnight. The air grows warmer, carrying the faint scents of beeswax, polished wood, and blooming flowers from the gardens beyond. Change, on this scale, feels like magic. Yet, you know, there is a science to renewal. In ecosystems, the reintroduction of a single species can set off a cascade. Wolves returning to a forest alter the movements of deer, which allows vegetation to regrow, which stabilizes riverbanks, which changes the course of streams. In the same way, the return of love here has rippled outward, restoring what had been eroded by time and sorrow. She looks into his eyes, searching. There is stillness there, but not the heavy stillness of before. This is a calm surface under which something alive is moving. He speaks her name, and it is the first time she has heard it in this voice. She smiles, though her cheeks are wet. You notice how the light lingers on them, like the way evening sun catches the edges of waves. Light, after all, is both particle and wave matter and motion in one. It moves at a constant speed in a vacuum, yet bends when it enters new mediums, slowing, refracting, changing direction. Love, you think, is not so different. It moves with constancy at its core, but shifts shape depending on the space it enters. They stand together, her hand still in his. Around them, the castle is alive with quiet sounds, the ticking of a clock, whose gears are moving again, the rustle of leaves through a window now open to the air. Somewhere far above, a bell rings, not urgently, but as though marking the hour in a language only the stones understand. They walk through the halls, each room more alive than the last. In the kitchen, copper pans gleam on their hooks, catching the firelight. In the library, dust motes swirl lazily in the beams from high windows, the scent of paper and leather mingling with the faint sweetness of flowers drifting in from outside. She pauses there, her fingers brushing along the spines of books she once read in solitude, now seeing them in this new light. Outside, the gardens have erupted into bloom. You can see the geometry of petal spirals that follow the Fibonacci sequence, leaves angled to catch the maximum sunlight without shading each other. Bees move among them with purposeful grace, their bodies dusted with pollen. You remember that bees see in ultraviolet patterns invisible to the human eye, guiding them to the nectar. Every living thing here seems tuned to a frequency just beyond hearing, yet somehow felt. They return to the great hall at last, standing where they first met in fear and uncertainty. The rose's glass dome is empty now, the last petal gone, but its absence no longer feels like loss. It is a marker of time past, of a promise kept, of a change made possible only by its fragility. She looks at him, and the quiet between them is full not with words, but with the understanding that comes when two people have walked through fear, through absence, through change, and arrived together on the other side. The day outside begins to fade, the light softening into gold, then into the deep blues of evening. Shadows stretch long across the floor. Somewhere in the castle, a window is open, and you can hear the faint rush of water from a fountain in the courtyard. The sound is steady, unhurried. You think of rivers, how they carve stone, not by force alone, but by patience, how each drop carries a fragment away, reshaping the land over years, over centuries. Change, too, works this way. It may arrive in sudden light and warmth, but its roots are grown in countless small moments. A glance held a fraction longer, a question answered with honesty, a hand reached out when it was not certain to be taken. Night gathers around the castle. Lanterns glow in the windows, their light spilling onto the gardens below. Somewhere beyond, the forest waits in quiet shadow, its paths winding toward unknown places. And in that hush, in that pause between what has ended and what will begin. You feel it the way love does not stop at the moment of its awakening, but continues always to grow into the spaces ahead. And as the last of the day slips away, you wonder what new journey might begin when the first star appears. And so, our journey comes to rest. May your dreams be gentle and your night long and deep. This has been The Beauty and the Beast, a cozy bedtime story of love and time. From whispers of the night, sleep well, and until we meet again, good night.